On the afternoon of December 4th, 1872, Captain David Morehouse of the British brigantine De Gratia spotted a vessel drifting erratically in the Atlantic Ocean between the Azores and Portugal. The ship's course was unstable. No crew appeared on deck. No signals were made. After 2 hours of observation, Morehouse ordered his first mate, Oliver Deveau, to investigate. What Deveau found when he boarded that ship has remained unexplained for 152 years, despite the fact that we have every piece of physical evidence, every document, and every testimony. This is the story of the Mary Celeste. Not the legend, but the documented mystery that remains unsolved despite having all the facts. Oliver Deveau climbed aboard at approximately 3 p.m. on December 4th, 1872. The ship was the Mary Celeste, a two-masted brigantine, 103 feet long, registered out of New York. The main hatch was open. Water was present in the hold, about 3.5 feet, but not enough to suggest sinking. Deveau moved through the ship methodically, and with each space he entered, the mystery deepened. The captain's cabin was orderly. The bed was unmade. Personal belongings were in place. The captain's log lay open on the desk. The last entry was dated November 25th, 10 days earlier. It recorded the ship's position as 6 miles off Santa Maria Island in the Azores, noted weather conditions and course. There was nothing unusual, no distress, no problems. The log simply stopped. 10 days of voyage were missing. Deveau searched the rest of the ship. Crew quarters contained personal effects, clothing, pipes, boots. The cargo, 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol bound for Italy, was intact. 9 barrels were empty, likely from evaporation or leakage. The ship carried 6 months' worth of food and water. Provisions were sufficient to complete the voyage. The galley was orderly. This wasn't abandonment during a meal, despite what later legends would claim. What was missing told the real story. The ship's chronometer, used for calculating longitude, was gone. The sextant was missing. The ship's official papers were absent. And most significantly, the lifeboat was gone. The davits that held it were empty. A section of railing appeared broken or removed, possibly to launch the boat. 2 of the ship's pumps were disassembled on deck, suggesting the crew had been concerned about water and attempted repairs. The binnacle compass was destroyed. The ship's clock had stopped. What Deveau didn't find was any sign of violence, piracy, or struggle. No bloodstains, no damage from combat. No indication the ship had been boarded by hostile forces. The cargo was untouched. If pirates had taken the ship, why leave 1,700 barrels of valuable alcohol? The scenario made no sense. Equally puzzling was the lack of catastrophic damage. The ship was seaworthy enough that Deveau sailed it to Gibraltar with only 3 men. If it had been in danger of sinking, why was it still afloat 10 days later with no crew to maintain it? To understand why the abandonment made no sense, you need to know Captain Benjamin Briggs. He was 47, experienced, with a reputation for competence and caution. He was deeply religious and notably temperate. He didn't drink, despite carrying 1,700 barrels of alcohol. He wasn't traveling alone. His wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia were aboard. Briggs would not have risked his family without overwhelming reason. The crew consisted of 7 men. First mate Albert Richardson, second mate Andrew Gilling, 4 German sailors, and cook Edward Head. These were professionals with decades of combined experience. Whatever happened affected men who understood ships and the ocean. The Mary Celeste had departed New York on November 7th, 1872, bound for Genoa. The voyage should have been routine. Briggs had written to his mother on November 3rd expressing optimism. He mentioned Sarah and Sophia joining him. He noted the ship was in beautiful trim. There was no concern. 4 days later, they sailed. The ship's log shows steady progress eastward. Entries are brief and routine. Position, weather, sail configuration. The handwriting is neat, showing no stress. The final entry on November 25th at 8 a.m. places the ship near Santa Maria Island. Weather noted as unclear but not stormy. Then the log ends. Not dramatically, just ends. Between November 25th and December 4th, something caused 10 people to abandon a seaworthy ship with adequate supplies and climb into a lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic. Then they vanished. No bodies were ever found. No wreckage of the lifeboat was located. 10 people disappeared as if they'd never existed. When both ships arrived in Gibraltar on December 13th, British authorities impounded them and began an inquiry. The investigator, Frederick Solly Flood, was immediately suspicious. The circumstances seemed convenient. Both ships had left New York around the same time. Their captains knew each other. They'd had dinner before sailing. The Mary Celeste was found abandoned but intact, creating a perfect salvage opportunity. Solly Flood suspected conspiracy. Had the captains arranged a fake abandonment to split salvage money, with something going wrong? Solly Flood examined a sword found under Briggs's bed, convinced rust stains were blood. Tests were inconclusive. He theorized the Dei Gratia crew had murdered everyone and faked the discovery. But this theory had massive problems. If they'd committed murder, why leave the valuable cargo? Why not sell everything? Why invite investigation through a salvage claim? And critically, there was no evidence of violence. No blood beyond questionable sword stains. No signs of struggle. If a massacre occurred, the perpetrators cleaned up perfectly, but forgot to steal what they'd murdered for. It made no sense. The court proceedings lasted 3 months. In the end, no evidence of fraud or foul play was found. The Mary Celeste had been abandoned for unknown reasons. The salvage claim was legitimate. But instead of the typical 1/3 to 1/2 value, around $80,000, the court awarded only $8,000. The reduced payment signaled suspicion despite lack of proof. The outcome satisfied no one. Morehouse received far less than maritime custom dictated. The Mary Celeste's owners got their ship back, but its reputation was destroyed. No crew wanted to sail a vessel associated with mysterious death. And the families of the 10 people aboard received no answers, no bodies, no closure. Theories multiplied. Pirates or mutiny? No. Pirates would have taken the cargo or ship. There was no evidence of violence. Briggs was known as fair. The crew was professional. A massive storm? No. The ship showed minimal damage. Rigging was intact. If a storm was severe enough to cause panic, there would be evidence in the ship's condition. And why take the chronometer and sextant during panicked evacuation? Fire or explosion? There was no fire damage, no charring, no smoke stains. An actual explosion would leave structural damage. There wasn't any. But what about fear of explosion? This theory suggests the crew detected fumes or heard noises suggesting imminent explosion and evacuated temporarily, planning to return. This explains taking navigation instruments. They intended to stay near the ship and reboard. But if that was the plan, why didn't they? An underwater earthquake? These create shock waves through water. Ships report violent shaking and explosion-like noises during seaquakes. A crew experiencing this might believe the ship was breaking apart and evacuate. The Azores sit on tectonic boundaries where earthquakes occur. But this doesn't explain the partly set sails suggesting deliberate handling, not panic. It doesn't explain the missing chronometer and papers. The most likely theory involves alcohol fumes. In 2005, Dr. Andrea Sella of University College London conducted an experiment. He built a replica cargo hold with alcohol barrels like the Mary Celeste carried. He discovered that if barrels leaked, vapor could accumulate. Under certain conditions, vapors could ignite in a flashover, rapid combustion producing flame but minimal pressure. The hold could fill with fire for seconds without damaging the ship. To a crew watching from above, it would appear the hold was on fire or about to explode. The rational response: immediate evacuation. They'd grab essentials, chronometer for navigation, sextant for position, ship's papers for ownership, and get into the lifeboat quickly. They might remain tethered by rope, monitoring the situation. If the ship didn't explode, they could reboard. But if the rope broke or weather separated the boat from the ship, the crew would be adrift in a small boat in the Atlantic. Their survival chances would be minimal. The ship would drift by wind and current, eventually found days later, intact but abandoned. This theory fits most facts. It explains the missing lifeboat, navigation equipment, and papers. It explains the open hatch. They opened it to investigate fumes. It explains the disassembled pumps. They were checking the hold. It explains the lack of damage. No actual explosion occurred. And it explains why they never returned. They died at sea after separation. The theory is plausible and supported by experiment, but it cannot be proven because we have no witnesses and no bodies. The Mary Celeste story became independent of facts. In 1884, Arthur Conan Doyle published J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement, a fictionalized account. Doyle added dramatic details: a warm meal on the table, a cat sleeping in the cabin, pipes still smoking. None of this was true. Doyle invented these for literary effect, but they were widely believed and reprinted as fact. For decades, accounts included these fictional details presented as truth. The mythology grew. Some claimed the ship was in perfect condition, crew vanished mid-activity. Others claimed bloodstains everywhere. Some said the clock was running, others that it stopped at the exact moment of disappearance. The Mary Celeste became less historical event, more maritime legend. In the 20th century, it was linked to the Bermuda Triangle, despite being found 2,000 miles away between the Azores and Portugal. But facts rarely interfere with mythology. UFO abduction was proposed, sea monsters, time portals. These theories share unfalsifiability. You can't prove a negative. They exist unconstrained by evidence. What makes the Mary Celeste genuinely mysterious isn't lack of facts. We have extensive facts, and they don't give a definitive answer. We know the ship's exact condition. We have the log. We have testimony. We know who was aboard, the cargo, the route, the weather. We have more documentation than for most ships of that era. Yet we can't definitively say what happened. We can develop plausible theories and eliminate impossible ones, but we can't prove any beyond doubt. This is because the crucial evidence, testimony of the 10 people who were there, is permanently missing. They're the only witnesses, and they're dead. Without bodies, without lifeboat wreckage, without any physical trace, we can't close the loop. We can say what probably happened. We can say what almost certainly didn't. But we can't say with certainty what did, because those who knew are gone. The Mary Celeste herself was sold repeatedly after Gibraltar released her. Her reputation as cursed depressed her value. In 1885, 13 years after being found, she was deliberately run aground off Haiti in an insurance fraud scheme. The ship was destroyed. Her timbers rotted or were salvaged. Within decades, almost nothing physical remained. What we have is documentation: court records, testimony, the log, newspaper accounts. From these, we reconstruct what happened. But reconstruction isn't witnessing, it's interpretation. And interpretation involves uncertainty. Sophia Briggs was 2 years old when she boarded with her parents. She had no understanding of ships or ocean or danger. Whatever happened in the final hours, evacuation into a lifeboat or some other fate, she experienced without comprehension, clinging to her mother. Among the tragedies of the Mary Celeste, Sophia's presumed death is perhaps most affecting. The men chose to go to sea and accepted risks. Sophia had no choice. She was there because her father thought it safe for his family to travel together. He was wrong, and the ocean took her as completely as everyone else. The Mary Celeste asks us to confront the limits of knowledge. We assume sufficient investigation can answer any question. Advanced forensics solve cold cases. Satellite imagery finds lost vessels. DNA identifies remains. We've become accustomed to mysteries being solvable with enough technology. The Mary Celeste reminds us this isn't always true. Some questions remain unanswered, not because we lack investigative tools, but because the evidence we'd need no longer exists or never existed in accessible form. What happened to the 10 people aboard? We know with confidence they left in the lifeboat, taking navigation equipment and documents. They did not return. They died somewhere in the Atlantic. Their bodies were never recovered. Beyond that, we're in probability and speculation. The alcohol fume theory is plausible and fits most evidence, but it's not proven. It may never be proven. We have facts, we don't have truth. There's a difference. The Mary Celeste was found intact. Her crew never was. The ship told us everything it could: position, condition, what was present and missing. But the 10 people who knew what happened took that knowledge to the bottom of the Atlantic, and the ocean keeps secrets better than any conspiracy could. We have the facts. We'll never have the truth. Maybe that's what makes this the perfect mystery. Not because we don't know enough, but because we know everything, except the one thing that matters. What they saw that made them abandon a perfectly good ship and sail into oblivion. The Mary Celeste drifted on, empty and patient, waiting to be found. The people aboard simply disappeared into the largest graveyard on Earth, leaving only questions that 152 years of investigation cannot definitively answer. Some mysteries aren't mysterious because evidence is lacking. They're mysterious because the evidence leads to multiple plausible conclusions, and the witnesses who could tell us which is correct are permanently silent. The Mary Celeste is that kind of mystery, and it always will be.